Okay, peeps, we're back with Biblio Files, and I am so excited about this particular episode. Actually, it's a two-parter, and because there's just so much to talk about. You know, when Lynette and I were discussing this, we were like, yeah, there's a little bit more here than just for one episode. So I'm very excited to have Lynette M. Smith with me today. She has become a friend. We've had many discussions about writing and all of this, and I'm just really grateful that we managed to be connected through Facebook and through our writing and whatnot. But she does something really important and very special, and it's kind of one of the bugaboos of writers. You know, writing the book is one thing, but all the stuff that has to happen afterwards, you get it done and it's like, oh, I have to do all of that? Wait a minute, what happened here? So I want to introduce you to Lynette M. Smith, and she is a copy editor, and there's a lot more to that title, and I'm going to let her fill it in. Lynette, welcome to our show. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. It's so exciting to be here. Woo-hoo! Getting to talk about all these exciting things that authors are kind of going, ew, well, okay. To me, it's exciting, and it's so funny because you, for example, are an author of fiction, and you have an amazing imagination, and I'm the other, you know, what is it? You would be the right brain, and I'm the one with the left brain. I don't have a lot of imagination, but I can sure spot that extra period at the end of a sentence.
Yay!
And you know, sometimes I think I'd rather slit my wrist and do what you do, and you probably think you'd rather slit your wrist and do what I do. It takes all kinds. It truly does. Since 2004, I've been operating a business called All My Best Copy Editing and Heartfelt Publishing. The subtitle does change from time to time, and it was about 2 years ago that I decided to focus exclusively working with book authors, book publishers, and book publishing coaches to help authors get their books into the kind of shape that they'd be proud of and that they wouldn't be embarrassed from. So that's kind of the short version. I've got about 30 years experience in copy editing in one form or another, and I've brought that to bear in what is now, you know, part of that 30 years is the last 16 years operating this business. So I started out doing editing of nonfiction, anything. And after a while I went, well, let me let a fiction thing or two in there. And then I went, well, this is kind of fun. And after a while I thought, well, I do have a skill at that as well, so I might as well include that in my, you know, selection of services. And over the years, I too have learned what's involved in publishing a book and what my role is in the process. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later.
Right, absolutely. So we're splitting this into two parts. First, we're going to talk about copy editing itself, and then we're going to talk about layout and proofreading. They're two completely separate things, and I think a lot of my compatriots, especially as we're new to writing and publishing, kind of confuse those things as being one and the same. People think that they're editing when actually what they're doing is just proofreading, and then a lot of times people think that during their proofreading that they're doing editing, and I found that at least when I have to do it myself, and of course you always end up doing at least one run through of a complete edit yourself before you turn it over to anybody else, because you don't want to be completely and utterly embarrassed. And so I have found that one of the things that I have to guard against is trying to do that while I write, because that can create writer's block and all kinds of icky stuff. So, you know, you get to the end and you go, okay, so I've got this draft. The story is finished. I'm pretty satisfied with it, sort of, I think. But now what do I do? Because although I think I write fairly succinctly, And I've got a fairly good grasp on grammar and spelling. When I'm writing, that part of my brain is not functioning. It's just going from my head through my fingers onto the page. Okay. And so first of all, there's those who think that they need to do this all themselves. And I think that's a big mistake. And secondly, I really honestly believe that we get caught up sometimes in it so much that it's 8 years later after we finish the first draft before the book ever gets published, because we keep going over it, and we have a beta reader that finds more mistakes. And it's like, man, every time I turn around, somebody's found a new mistake in this book, and it's so discouraging and all that. So what do you say to the people who are going through this process and getting all wrapped around the axle about all of this stuff?
Well, I'm going to give you a personal experience first. When I wrote my book on writing heartfelt letters of appreciation back in 2012, I was a copy editor then too, of course, and I went, okay, I'm the kind of person who'll get all wrapped up in the grammar and the spelling and all of that stuff when I need to just get this done. You've probably heard the expression by now that the purpose in that first draft, it's got a nickname. It's the SFD, the shitty first draft. All you're supposed to do, and to be crude again, is just throw it up on paper or in the computer. Just get it there. Don't get hung up on those details.
Okay, peeps, do you hear that? How many times have we said that in the last several episodes? If you haven't figured it out by now, that's a key, all right? Just write it.
Just write it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and so just get it done, and it was quite a discipline for me to have to do that, especially being a copy editor. But I went, nope, don't stop, just keep going. Yeah. I mean, I had a sort of an elaborate table of contents as an outline, because this is a nonfiction reference book, and I was using that as my guideline as to what to write about next. But just keep writing, just keep writing, just keep writing. And when I did that, then I went back and I got critical for the second go-round reading it. And then I went back again for the third go-round reading it, and I got as critical as I could be. But I'm only one set of eyes. Well, if you don't count these, I'm only one set of eyes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I needed a second set of eyes. I, the copy editor, hired a copy editor.
Yep.
Now, this particular copy editor was extremely talented and also did developmental editing, helping you with the content and the development of the draft. But I had given her what I thought was rather highly polished. And what she did was she came along and suggested extra things that I could write about in there. She also said there's a much shorter way to say this. And she sparkled up this whole manuscript. She brought sparkle to it, and she got done, and I just went, wow, that was an investment that was well spent. It truly was. So talking about the process there, she did copy editing with just a touch of developmental editing in there. And after that, it goes to design, a graphic designer to be laid out. And then it comes back from the designer, usually as a PDF document that shows the layout. And you have a choice to view that in a 2-page spread or just 1 page like this. You should view it this way, because then you can see left and right margins and make sure they're right. So, but here's the thing. The author gets this PDF layout back from the designer, and the designer says, so, are we ready to publish? Do you like it? And you're just going, well, what do I do besides just read it one more time? And here's where that layout check comes in. And we'll talk more about this in part 2, but you've got to check the layout for errors in layout. And then, yes, read it one more time for errors in content, like 2 periods at the end of the sentence or the in the middle of the sentence. Those things are important to catch before it's too late. But that's not the stage to go back and say, oh, I could have said this so much better. Let me rewrite that paragraph. The designer will kill you. or charge you a lot, and probably the latter because the other one's illegal. You don't want to do that then. You want to make sure that what you've handed to the copy editor back before you had it designed was your best effort in a final draft.
Right. Absolutely.
So what you're doing when you get the PDF proof copy is reading the proof. Therefore, proofreading. That's where the word proofreading comes from. Copy editing is editing the copy, what's in the manuscript. So that's the distinction.
Okay, so I know that one of the things that I did to really help me in my process is I have beta readers who go through and they catch a lot of things for me ahead of time so that I, then when I do, well, book 1, I did 9 complete edits, including a professional editor and a professional proofreader for that book. And so we get it back and it's like, oh, great. The book's here. It's like it's got my name on it. It's got the cover. Yay. And gee, there's words in there and they all line up like they're supposed to and all that kind of stuff. Yay. And then you go back through and you find, okay, so there are extra spaces here and there's, overuse of commas in this area and blah, blah. And, the story's still there and most of your readers won't even catch that kind of stuff. And that doesn't take away from the fact that it's a good story. But the fact of the matter is it's never completely perfect, is it?
No, it can be excellent. Never strive for perfection. Strive for excellence, because otherwise you'll make yourself crazy. People who are perfect die and go to heaven. They're done. Don't be perfect. Be excellent.
Excellent. It's good. It's not my job to be perfect. At least not yet. I'm working on trying to just be the best me that I can be, and that might be a little bit different than the best you, which is fine. That's great. That's what makes life so amazing is we're all so different, right? So, okay. So as a writer, I turn my baby over to the copy editor with fear and trepidation because it's going to come back with mistakes, right? Okay. Sure. As a copy editor, when you're looking at this, are you thinking, oh, this person really sucks. Look at all these mistakes, blah, 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 blah. Or is it just, okay, so this is working in the story. Oh, wait a minute. There's an issue with this passage. It doesn't read right. When I get that back, I'm fortunate enough that I did not take umbrage. I didn't go, oh man, they're really mean or anything like that. I just said, oh, wait a minute. But the other thing is I've noticed that in some cases, my copy editor says, I think this should be this way. And I look at it because I know the bigger picture of what I want for the book. And I go, no, I'm going to leave it the same as I had it. For your copy editor is not your dictator, right?
Right. Your copy editor is your friend. And when I receive a manuscript to copy edit, I'm not one of those mean people that goes through and says, oh, this is awful. Don't they even know how to write? No. I get excited when I see these things and I go, woohoo, I can help.
Oh, there you go. Oh,
there's
that's
a difference in attitude, and there's, I'm not the writer's enemy. I'm the writer's friend. I want the writer to be successful. And so when I'm copy editing, I'm copy editing with 2 hats on at the same time, which is really kind of hard to do. But I do it. Well, hard to do. I can do it. I'm used to this. The copy editor's hat that finds the errors, but also the reader's hat that says, well, this is potentially confusing. Let's see, what did she mean? And I think, oh, this is what she meant. All right. Now, how could that be conveyed more clearly to the reader, where the reader can get it and not be distracted by the confusion? And so then I propose just minor rewrites here and there because I'm not a developmental editor. I propose those minor rewrites. And you mentioned earlier about, changing a word or something else. When I'm wearing the reader's hat and I'm reading, I'm thinking, oh, this almost wants to be that word instead. And there's nothing terribly wrong with the first word, but for some reason the second word sounded more natural and appropriate to my ear. Now, I don't just change those. We use track changes so you see what the changes are. But I would highlight that word and put a comment out to the side that said, or this word, your choice.
Right.
That's all. It's just out there for you. Maybe it's one you didn't happen to think of. It's totally up to you. I'm not vested in the outcome.
Exactly. Well,
Yeah.
the thing is, too, is one of the things I've noticed is I've had different people read my books, and one of them thinks that this particular phrase is just beautifully said, and another one says, oh, that's just so awkward. And I think sometimes it's because of how we speak as individuals and what we're used to listening for. What area of the country or the world do we come from? And then also keeping in mind the character themselves, if it's a character speaking, whatnot, where did they come from? Is
Right.
that going to be the way their speech would naturally flow
Right.
or not? And it might not be the same as what we would actually say.
Right. You want to stay true to the character, and that's part of getting entrenched in the manuscript. When I don't pick up one client project and then go to lunch and come back and work on a different client project if the first one isn't finished, because I'm living in that first environment. I can't change hats that easily to the other one and stay true to the first one.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I do book my work sequentially, this project till the end, then that project till the end, and so on, to the best of my ability. There are interruptions at times, but not for that creative copy editing part.
Right.
I'll just interject to say that an interruption would be if a book layout had come back to me with a revision and I had to compare it to the errors I marked in the first one. Well, that's more of a mechanical yes, 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 yes. I can interrupt to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But
Right.
other than that, I stay true to the manuscript I'm working on.
Right. And one of the things that you are uniquely qualified to answer is the question of the author's voice. Every author has their own voice, and then the characters within their books have their own voice, assuming that's a fiction book. And so being true to that voice, I think, is really important. But sometimes we're still working on finding that voice. I've noticed authors that I truly love who've written many, many books. Their earlier works are slightly different than their later works. And I think that a good copy editor is also, I think, one of the things that they seem to do is to help you recognize your voice. That's why when you look at one of their suggestions, you can say, yes, that works for me, or no, that doesn't, and start to know and understand why that's true.
Right, exactly. And by the way, as an author, you can begin to develop your own style guide, ways you like to see things worded, or what you consider acceptable in terms of poor grammar on the part of what somebody spoke. Things like this, just little ideas to remind you what is okay with you so that you can stay consistent from one book to the next and yet constantly improve and constantly refine. Now, some of those things that you work up are helpful for you to tell the copy editor in case the copy editor sees an inconsistency in the application of your guideline or rule and can help you flag it. So that's something too. I mean,
yeah, I really have to say that I have a great deal of respect for people who do what you do. And part of it is because lately, as as a current author, I'm going back and rereading some of my favorite books and favorite authors because I use that to teach myself certain things. And I'm finding that I read differently now than I used to read because I'm noticing things that before I was just engaged in the story and all this, and now I go, oh, that was a really nice transition, or I really liked the way they approached that, or I love to see how this character is doing this particular development, and that one sentence that all of a sudden goes, oh, they're changing, they're learning, you know, all of these kinds of things, these things that I notice. As a copy editor, I imagine that you read things a lot differently, even when you're trying to read for pleasure.
I do, but I finally learned, at least when I'm reading for pleasure, for the most part, just remind myself, nobody's paying me right now. Just enjoy it.
I love that. I love that. That's great. So, okay, so let's get down to some practical matters, because obviously you could talk for hours on your processes and all these kinds of things, but I think probably one of the things that my viewers would like to know is, so, all right, so I'm not making any money with my book yet. That's hopeful, but it's not a given. And my budget is limited. How do I go about making sure that if I pay a copy editor to edit my book, that I'm going to get my money's worth?
First of all, hire a copy editor that seems compatible with what your goals are. You'll find some people who will just walk all over your style. Now they shouldn't, but sometimes they will. They'll rewrite passages just because they like them better the other way, not because there's a good reason to do it. And I'll tell you honestly, it can happen when you start falling into that trap. Sometimes I start making edits and I go, wait a minute, time out. This is ego talking. Back off, take that off, take that off. You've got no business making those changes. And so I catch myself at it. So it's an ongoing discipline to just not walk all over the author's work, but instead to help it shine in the best way the author intends. Now, if I see a manuscript where the author is using a lot of adverbs and a lot of adjectives, they're telling and not showing, I can't change their style altogether, but I can ask them in an email separately. I'll say, I noticed you're using a lot of adjectives and adverbs. Would you like me to just leave those alone, or would you like me to address some of them if I see easier or better ways to show an idea? And I'll just ask outright. So I'm trying to be careful to go according to the author's rules.
And that can be a really precarious balance.
A tightrope.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, because it's not like you don't want any adjectives or adverbs, but I noticed that very crops up a lot for me. And I've had to go through and pull out varies, and sometimes just completely pull them out, and sometimes put in something different that expresses it in a different way. But then there's, the business of showing is sometimes really confusing for people. And I think maybe that's a question we can talk about at another time. But I think that probably one of the things a good copy editor becomes, especially once an author creates a relationship with that copy editor, is this kind of relationship of trust and mentoring that happens because a copy editor has experience in a wide variety of genres and styles and all of that kind of stuff. So I think that it's really important for that relationship to develop in a way where the author doesn't feel
diminished
is a good word, and but the author also has to be receptive when the editor has a valid point, and they have to kind of learn about one another, about the styles and all that kind of stuff, which is why probably having a consistent copy editor person, if you're doing a series of books, like in my case, is really important.
I would agree completely, because you develop that working relationship. I have a client who has written mostly nonfiction, but I've worked with him since 2010 on a number of projects, and we've gotten to the point where he knows I can read his mind pretty well and read his intentions pretty well, and I edit with that in mind. And my gosh, he gives me more. He's trying to turn me into a developmental editor, and I keep saying, no, Bob, not my job, Bob. And lately he had something, he was developing an online course, and he said, go ahead and rearrange the lessons into whatever order you think makes the most sense. And I went, oh, no.
That's not happening.
Not my job, Bob. I'm not the big picture person. As a matter of fact, I've drawn the analogy in the past on projects that you can be a forest editor. That's the developmental content editor. You can be a trees editor, where you focus a little bit better on the trees. But I am more of a branches and leaves and even veins on the leaves kind of an editor. I'm not too much on the big picture, but I've gotten better at it. You know, I can now flag, let's say if it's fiction, the fact that 2 chapters ago, where you're still writing about the same character and she hasn't changed clothes, she was wearing the yellow outfit. But suddenly now it talks about chartreuse or some other color. And I go, wait. And I have this little niggling, and I go back and I go, sure enough, she didn't change clothes. And so I'll bring it up as a query to the author, you know. But generally speaking, yeah, you learn to work with the author and get used to their style and stay true to it.
And it's so gratifying when that relationship works really, really well. And it certainly makes for a much better product in the final analysis. One of the problems with being self-published is that self-published authors have a rep out there in general as being a low quality output. And that was one of the things I was afraid of, because I did decide that I was going to self-publish for a lot of really good reasons that I'll talk about on another show. But when I made that decision, the other decision I made was I wasn't going to put out something where in the first 2 pages they found 50 errors and it looked shoddy and amateurish. Now, I'm still working on that. I'm actually in the process of doing all 3 books, a new edition of those, where I correct some of the things and I'm rearranging some things and actually eliminating some stuff, and not out of the story, but just, you know, for the look and feel of the books. And that was brought on by some of your suggestions, as well as some of my beta readers who are also my fans, which really makes me happy. And that has been, that was a difficult journey and decision to make, but I will re-release these books in a more professional matching format. One of the things that I discovered that I didn't notice until one of my readers pointed it out recently was this book, the formatting in this book is different than the formatting in the next 2 books. And the formatting in the next 2 books is much, much better. So I'm going to reformat this one so that it all matches. So, and then put it out for the holidays for gift giving and stuff. But thank you for what you do. It's really, really important. And we're kind of short on time, so I want to be sure and do 2 things. Number 1, Lynette's website is allmybest.com, which, by the way, I love that domain name. It's beautiful. And the site is very informative. There are some free documents that you can get, and she has a newsletter that's not horrendously overwhelming. She's not putting out a newsletter every other day, which is great. But she's a lot of really good information there. And if you're looking for somebody to help you get your book out there in a way that will not look like it's indie published. Okay, that should not be a bad word for somebody to say, but sometimes you'll say it with a sneer. So if you're looking for somebody who can really make a difference for you, I really think that you need to check out what Lynette has for you. Lynette M. Smith, and she's also written this really wonderful book. Can you show us your book? Ta-da, that we discussed. All right.
The world's most boring title, 80 Common Layout Errors to Flag When Proofreading Book Interiors.
You know what? It says, it's like what the British say, it's exactly what's on the tin, right?
Exactly right. Exactly right. No false promises there.
That's great.
When you get that PDF layout and you say, gosh, what do I do besides just read it one more time? I'd say read this first, all 40 pages of it.
Oh, no, 40 pages?
Oh, no. Oh, big print.
That's awesome.
But that's what you'll want to do. You can hire a proofreader to do that also, or instead. But one of those little shortcuts is to be aware of these things on your own.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you. We're going to do this again, folks. Next week's episode, we're going to talk about layout, and we're going to talk about specifically proofreading, which is actually different than editing, as we said. And she's going to give us some tips and tricks that we can do that's going to make our editors and proofreaders a lot happier with us, because there's going to have a lot less work to do. And it's also a great peace of mind. So thank you, Lynette. We're going to be back. Peeps, I hope that when you come to do this, that you pay attention, go to allmybest.com and pick up some great information about how to be a better writer, because that's what we're about, right, is being better.
Right.
All right. Thank you. And we'll see you next time on Biblio Files.
Bye.